In our increasingly electrified society, that's where a resilient grid matters most. ITC Great Plains is ensuring the greater grid can meet our energy needs now and long into the future. Learn more at itc-holdings.com.
Good evening. Welcome to the new season of Kansas Legislature right here on Smoky Hills Public Television. I am your moderator this season, Becky Kiser. I am an employee of Eagle Communications in Hays. I work in the news area for Hays Post and also Eagle Radio. And also I am a policy fellow with the Docking Institute at Fort Hays State University, the Docking Institute of Public Affairs, which helps create this program in partnership with Smoky Hills Public Television. And we also want to thank our sponsor this evening, who've always been great about this, ITC Great Plains. We're delighted to have 4 of our area legislators with us this evening. We appreciate their being here, taking time out to talk about the issues that are important to you as Western Kansans. I'm going to introduce them initially, and then we're going to go back and ask everybody to talk a little bit about who they are and about the committees that they are serving on this year. So starting furthest away from me is Barb Wassinger, Representative Barb Wassinger, who of course is from Hays. Sitting closest to me is Representative Steve Howe. He is from Salina. Next to Barb is Representative Troy Waymaster, who is from right here in Bunker Hill. And then also joining us this evening from Goodland is our Senator Rick Billinger. So we definitely want to thank everybody for being with us. And Barb, let's just start with you, if you would. Tell us a little bit about yourself and remind us what committees you are working on. We're what, 1 month into the session already?
Yes, very quickly. We've moved fast, even when we feel like we're moving at a turtle speed. I am in my second term as the District 111. I am on taxation, financial institutions and rural development, as well as higher education. I am the Vice Chair of Higher Education, and I'm also on Joint Rules and Regulations, which I was the chair last year, and it being a joint committee, it goes from the House is the chair and then the Senate is the chair. So I'm doing that. I'm the vice chair this year, and Senator Kelly Warren is the chair. So that's, I've been in politics quite a while in Ellis County and Hays. So it's good to be in the state capitol working with these really distinguished people. So.
All right, thank you, Barb. Let's move now to Representative Steve Howe. And Steve, this is the first time I've had the opportunity to meet you. You are from Salina.
Yes, that is right, Becky. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your listeners this evening. I'm Stephen Howe. I'm a freshman legislator. And so I've been in it for just over a year. And I'm learning quite a bit. I serve on 3 committees, insurance and pensions, which would have oversight over the CAPERS pension program, which many people across Kansas are participants in. I'm also a member of the Transportation Committee and the Federal and State Affairs Committee.
All right. Yeah. Also joining us, Representative Troy Waymaster, again from right here in Bunker Hill. And Troy, you have quite a bit of experience under your belt now, and
sometime, yes.
Serving some important positions. Tell us about it.
Well, I'm Troy Waymaster, as Becky mentioned, right here from Bunker Hill. I serve in the 109th Kansas House District, which actually encompasses about 7 counties in central and western Kansas. I'm the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, so we have been looking at the governor's budget that she has submitted to us at the beginning of the legislative session. And then also we have kind of like a second budget that's moving through as well, and that's with the Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas Task Force. And so they've set up some advisory panels to go through the American Rescue Plan Act money that we receive from the federal government. And I'm serving as chairman of the Efficiency and Modernization Advisory Panel also during the legislative session. So I'm kind of wearing 2 hats while we're in session this year.
And then also joining us this evening, as we mentioned, Senator Rick Billinger, who has been with us for a long time representing a good-sized portion of western Kansas. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Rick.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks for the invitation this evening. Appreciate being part of the program with my colleagues here. I represent the 40th Senate District, which is the largest Senate district in the state of Kansas. I represent 14 counties. And I've started in the House in 2011, which was the last time we did redistricting. So
Deja vu.
Like you get to do it all over
That's
again.
exactly right. And I serve on the Senate Ways and Means Committee, which is the budget in the Senate. And we have a few subcommittees, and I chair 3 of the subcommittees on budget. And that's really the only standing committee that I serve on. I also serve on the Building and Constructions. I've been on that committee. It's a joint committee with the House for a number of years. And I'm on the redistricting. I'm also, I was on the Transportation Task Force, and look forward to working on a lot of the interesting issues. It's a very unusual year because we do have excess revenue this year, which is different than my past years on the budget. So.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that in a little bit. First of all, before we get started, I want to remind everyone that, of course, we're here for you and giving you the opportunity to find out about what's going on and to ask your questions or maybe express concerns to the legislators this evening. Toll-free number that you can call here is 1-800-337-4788. So think about what you would like to ask our legislators and give this call. Again, toll-free, 1-800-337-4788. Well, let's talk about that extra money first of all. Senator, as you said, and I as a reporter have been around you for a number of years, and it seems like you're always talking about, we've got to watch where we're going to spend the limited funds we have. As you said, it's a little bit different this year.
It certainly is, and I've been very cautious with our committee that, just because we have excess revenue doesn't mean we need to just spend it to spend it. And Troy and I served together on interim budget committees through the summer, and every time we met, we talked about how we could use these funds, particularly in a one-time manner, like paying off debt, putting additional money into capers, and maybe deferred maintenance at the universities, just things that we could use for one-time spends, because it looks to me a lot like it did in '08. In 2008, we had approximately $800 million ending balance, and by the end of '09, we had $1 billion negative balance. So we were in the hole $1 billion. So we'd practically burned through almost $2 billion. And I look back and I say, well, what happened in '08? Well, we had the housing bubble, and you look at what's going on today. You can list your home today and probably get a couple of offers overnight for more than you even listed at. Looks to me like another housing bubble is. We're pretty much right there with this same type of housing bubble, and in addition to that, inflation is just terrible. We haven't seen this kind of inflation in years and years. I'm not sure we've ever seen this kind of inflation. I'm not sure it was this bad, even in the 20s and 30s. I don't believe that we're getting real accurate information on exactly how bad it is. And, I can give you a lot of examples as we go on here, but I just think we need to be cautious that we don't get too carried away and make sure that we have a good safety net. And one of the things that I do look at is what's going to be coming up 5 years and 10 years. And our deal with the courts on the education going forward, I think after this will be the last year, and then we'll be tied to the CPI. What will the CPI look like next year? I mean, it's scary. We got to just be very cautious.
So I guess, you know, as individuals, Kansans have to watch their budgets, their family budgets. So what you're saying is the state government has to do that as well, the legislature.
Yes.
Be careful about it. You know, you talked about the housing bubble too, Rick, in reference back to 2008, and it makes me think, I know we've had several experiences across the state and panels and studies. Apparently, there's kind of a shortage of housing in Kansas, affordable housing. I know that Ellis County and Hayes Barb is specifically looking at this issue, but we're not the only community in Kansas that seems to have a problem. Does that hinder the state in the especially western Kansas and even in Salina, which of course is a little bit bigger? Steve, do you think it's a problem there?
Yes, Becky, that's our #1 issue in Salina is workforce and housing, and both go hand in hand. A lot of employers are looking to add employees and bring on more people so they can expand their business operations, but a lot of people are having trouble finding places to live in the community. So it's creating a real constraint on our local economy, and it's something that our stakeholders in Saline County are looking to possibly apply for some of the Spark funding that is available, that one-time money that's coming through via the federal government.
Are you going to let him have that, Troy?
Well, we're actually starting those meetings this next week. Actually, on Monday is when we have the, I would say, the kickoff meeting for the Spark advisory panels. And so we're going to be talking just with my committee, the Efficiency and Modernization, which basically is going to focus on state government. How can we modernize and make ourselves more efficient at a state level? But definitely there's also an advisory panel for economic development, which the housing needs would definitely fall within economic development. Throughout the entire state, whether it's rural or urban, all communities are having an issue with some type of housing. And so I think we're probably going to do this. I may come back on another show and say it's changed. But what most likely is going to happen is we'll take a portion of those ARPA funds that we received from the federal government that Stephen mentioned and basically have a block grant for housing. That'd be my ideology on how we would work forward with that. Probably administered through either the Housing Resource Center or the Department of Commerce, but that would be for the Economic Development Advisory Panel to make that decision. But we are definitely going to be trying to address the housing needs across the state.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. We want to go to our phone line now. We have Nick from Victoria who has a question he would like. Go ahead, Nick.
Yes, my question is regarding some of the recent snows that have happened around the state. And I've read in multiple articles around the state about how it's taken such long times to clean the snow. In Wichita area, some cities started clearing routes. And I guess I'd like to know what the panel has to say about what the state can do about that issue. And I'd also like to hear from the panel about the sales tax elimination on food as well.
Well, let's start with the sales tax on food and elimination. And as I understand it, that has been presented by the governor and is being looked at in a couple of bills, whether to do that. And again, Rick, because we've got this surplus of money, and so maybe we can reward Kansas. It's kind of tough when you've got surrounding states that do not charge that food sales tax.
I agree. I think it's something that we're looking at very carefully. You know, here again, whatever we do on food, that will go from here on down. So it's not a one-time spend. That's a spend that will affect the budget year after year after year. And I certainly don't want to jump in there and you know, get too far down the road. And then we do have a turn down in the economy, which is, I think it's going to come. We just don't know when. And turn around and then won't have funds to, you know, to take care of other things if we get too aggressive. I just think we got to be slow and cautious on this whole thing, and I don't disagree. I have 5 counties on the border with Colorado and Nebraska, and it's 0 in both of them, and I think it's an important thing we should look at. In the past few years, we have proposed this. The governor's vetoed it several times, and each time it was a ratchet. You know, it was a small amount, let's put it in effect, and then come back the next year, look at it, see if we have revenues where we could adjust again and ratchet down a little bit more, rather than just slashing it and then coming back and saying, well, we don't have enough funds to pay, you know, our CPI for the increase in schools, or we don't have enough to take care of, you know, the folks that work at the intellectually developmental disabled, you know, or the folks that are working in the rest homes. You know, I mean, there are so many challenges that we need to make sure we're able to cover all these that are, I mean, what do you do? We've had 15 rest homes close in the state of Kansas this year.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah. And you know, even in Hayes, at Via Christi, they've closed down wings.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you heard that or not, but, you know, I just think it's, you know, it's a serious problem we have.
And you know, the governor's being a little disingenuous. Just remember, it's an election year, and sometimes you change. People in that level definitely change. Kind of ease up their objectives and perspective, because 3 years ago, one of the things I think we need in order to get rid of the food sales tax, and that just to mention the fact that it could be groceries, food sales tax could be restaurants. It could go from $4 million to, you know, far more. But 3 years ago, we tried to say, when we took the tax code and made sure that we were taxing third-party sellers on the internet, which had been left out of our tax code, we had a bill that said any money that comes into that from now on needs to go towards the food sales tax reduction. And the governor vetoed it. We had a dedicated funding source, and after this year with all the boom in online sales, it would have made a big difference to try to bring it down. But it has been continually vetoed by the governor, and now this year she's got some extra money. And by the way, not only do we have extra money, but that means on the higher ed budget, we do the Historical Society to behavioral health, all the way up. Everyone is asking for, and the governor has put in her budget, $45 million for the Historical Society. Could they use it? Of course they can. But you know, when you start giving everyone, you know, $500 million here, or 100, you know, you're just starting to throw money away and you don't even know where it went. So everyone's asking for more money, and we have to pay close attention to that, because as the senator said, I think we need to be paying down some debt, and a lot of interest money can be used for things just like we're talking about.
One of the other aspects about eliminating the state sales tax, and I want to preface that, because we're not getting rid of the local sales tax that may have been put on by local forms of government. We're only taking away the 6.5% sales tax on food that's administered by the state. I've had a lot of local governments contacting me, asking me, well, you're going to decimate our budgets if you take the sales tax away on food. And I said, no, it's just the state sales tax rate. The other thing to say about this is, granted, yeah, we have some neighboring states that have 0% tax on food. I represent 2 counties that neighbor Nebraska. But we also have Missouri and Oklahoma that do impose some type of a sales tax rate. So if we would go completely down to 0, that's about a $450 million hit to the budget. That doesn't include the other tax provision that the governor had in her budget, which was a $250 rebate to every individual tax filer. Yes. And that has about another $500 million cost. So already right there, we have $1 billion in the governor's budget that is already dedicated and already spent down.
I always like to to think of it in terms of, and I've heard legislators do this often, compare it to your own family budget. Okay. That you know, you have to meet your budget and you need to pay bills, but it's also a good thing to put money away for a rainy day. And the state's no different with that.
Right, and right now we have 0 balance in our rainy day fund.
Really?
We did allocate 2 years ago about almost $82 million into the state rainy day fund, or also called the Budget Stabilization Fund. Last year, the governor took that money out of the rainy day fund because we didn't know with the pandemic, what the budget was going to look like.
Sure.
So right now, it's sitting at a 0 balance. And so we definitely need to put more funding back into the rainy day fund. We need to look at our debt. which is one thing that we've been doing on appropriations, seeing where we would like to address the needs as far as our debt. The one thing I do have to say I liked about the governor's budget was a few years ago we had what was called the layered capers payment, and we're paying a 7.75% interest rate on that. And if we would pay that off, it would save the state considerable amounts of money
Millions.
if we would pay it off now. So we're looking at getting away with that layered payment, but then obviously looking at other debt and then also putting money away into the rainy day fund.
I want to return to the other question that Nick from Victoria asked about with the recent snows that we had. All of you Western Kansans are used to lots of windshield time between where you live and going to Topeka. And Steve, with you being in Salina, a little bit bigger community, Nick was asking about the cleanup of the snows. And we obviously Interstate 70, I-70 is a big important road going east to west throughout Kansas. How does the state have any influence over what can be done for cleanup of snow on state highways and the federal interstate?
Sure. I mean, in Salina, it seems like the roads were cleared up pretty quickly. However, on some of the state roads, it might take a little while to get a crew out there. There is a post there off of I-135 south of Salina that serves a pretty big geographic area. I know a lot of those costs have gone up for salts and treatments of roads and stuff like that. Workforce, they're not immune to those issues as well. So
The state is equally getting the problem of finding workforce.
It's affected everybody.
In fact, we had
Interesting.
Secretary Lorenz, Julie Lorenz, the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, and that was one of the areas that she focused on was they're down on employees. And that could have been what was affecting some of the road clearing during this.
That's what I think, yeah.
Well, I will say, I think Kansas has a reputation for having really good roads and really good maintenance of and cleanup of things like the snow. And we appreciate those people getting out when it's negative 21 degrees.
Yeah, those
out
people
there.
and the utility people that
yes,
when
of
lines go
course.
down in below zero and you see them out there and you're so grateful because they're going to get the power back to your house and you can keep your house warm while they freeze. So we're grateful for everyone who goes out in the snow and cold and
Absolutely.
takes care of us.
We have on the phone with us now, Tim is calling in from Monument. Tim, what is your question of the legislators?
Yes, thank you for having me on. My question is, why did all of you vote to hurt Western Kansas and vote for a first congressional district map that stretches across the state and could have a representative to Congress come from urban eastern Kansas? Do you think Lawrence and Weston have the same interest?
No.
Thank goodness our governor vetoed that map. Will each of you sustain her veto?
Tim, one of the things about the first district is that we're shrinking in population. This is a math problem. This isn't, we need to keep, most of the state away from Western Kansas. The fact of the matter is, in the future, most of the state will be the first district, and we will have urban areas be the only different places than that. We just don't have enough people. We're losing population in southeast Kansas to northwest Kansas, everywhere. So this was not a vote against Western Kansas. This is a reality of not having population. And that's why that map came up. And it was not to try to hurt Western Kansas. It is not to, we're already going to lose seats in southeast and in northwest Kansas, our seats in the House. So until we can figure out how to get more people in our rural areas, including getting some more broadband, which we hope we can do, but until we can figure that out, this is a math problem. You have to have the same number of people in the first, the second, the third, and the fourth, right on the penny for the courts to look at. That's the first thing that it will throw out any map that we do. So this was not against Western Kansas. For sure, all of us are for Western Kansas. and support you. We're just trying to do what's best at the time and the numbers that we have.
Now, I was not privy to being on the redistricting committee, but Barb is exactly right. It comes down to numbers. It comes down to a mathematical equation of trying to have that balance in all 4 districts. And I just have to say, thankfully, we still have 4 congressional districts.
We haven't lost one.
There was some discussion prior that we'd be going down to 3.
Oh, gosh.
But luckily, some other states lost more population. We actually gained a little, but we were able to keep our 4th congressional district. But Barb is right. The 1st and the 2nd drastically lost population. The 3rd gained quite a bit. So the numbers have to come from somewhere. And I know there's been some discussion about, why is Lawrence on that map in the big first? Well, because we were trying to have communities of interest with KU and K-State in the same district. That's what they asked for. They wanted to be in the same district. And so I just have to basically agree with Barb that it comes down to a math problem. And like she said, until we can find a way or a mechanism to have more people moving into western Kansas, we will be looking at the big first, basically encompassing the entire state in the future.
What kind of challenges are there already and that might increase when you're looking at issues affecting Lawrence residents and, as Tim said, people who live in Weston out by your area, Rick?
Well, it's unfortunately it's a numbers game, and I agree with the 2 representatives that it's a numbers game. And, I'm on the redistricting, and what you look and the big first is way short. Okay, the district in Wichita, which would be the 4th, almost perfect, just the way it is, without making many changes at all. Its numbers are good. Then you go to the 2nd district, which is Johnson and Wyandotte. Both have grown. The only choice is either you split Johnson or you split Wyandotte. They can't stay together. There's too many people there. And in 10 years, Johnson will have their own. There'll probably parts of Johnson will be in the 2nd because there's too many in Johnson. So that's where we're headed. So the decision was either you split Johnson or you split Wyandotte. That's the first thing in the equation is which way you want to go. Well, Johnson didn't want to be split. Wyandotte didn't want to be split. So you look back and in past years and past maps, Wyandotte has been split several times. The bedroom communities south of Johnson have been part of that district before, so it's kind of going back to a similar type map in the past, which is one of the things that you look at when you're doing the mapping. So you had to figure that out there first, and then the numbers, just like the representatives have said here, the numbers, you've got to go to a more of a metropolitan type place in order to get numbers. Small counties in rural Kansas, you can't get the numbers. And 10 years ago, Manhattan come to the big first, I mean, that was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? Well, that's kind of where we're at again today, and they tried to keep the same interest, like Representative Waymaster said, keep the universities, Fort Hays, KU, K-State in the same one. All the military would be in the same one, Fort Riley and Fort Leavenworth, and so those are all, stayed in the 2nd district, and so things like that. When you're splitting, you try to use highways or rivers, and that's I-70. If you're north, you're in one. If you're in south, the other. It's pretty easy to come out there, and that goes all the way to the Kansas River. So, them are all the things that come into play. It's so many things that people don't even hear about or know about that come into play on these things. So. It's a tough deal, and if you had 5 people drawing maps, we'd all have something different,
Sure.
and we'd all think we got the best one. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And in the House, when we considered the underlying bill, which the governor vetoed, we considered, I think, through amendment, 8 different maps, and many of those were much more construed differently than the one we approved. So one would have put the 4th district all the way out to southwest Kansas, which is a far bigger change than what we saw in our underlying bill. So there was a lot of consideration, there was a lot of amendments offered, but the consensus was this was the best map. And so we'll see what happens when we go back next week.
And if this is approved, this is in effect for 10 years, right? Okay.
It still has to go to the federal courts for approval, yes. So we're not the end of this. As soon as we get something passed along, it has to go to the federal courts to approve. And the one thing they watch for is exact numbers in each of the districts. And a lot of the maps that came up they had a lot of deviation.
Yeah.
They would have been kicked out.
Yeah. The map that was approved had 0 deviation between districts, which is pretty hard to achieve.
I was just going to say that.
So-
That took some doing, didn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, Steve, you are a new legislator, but it makes me think of, over the years we've heard discussion about urban versus rural in Kansas, and it's probably true in other states as well, but do you think this reinforces and brings that out even more, or by bringing some of the more populated areas in eastern Kansas into the big first district, that we're kind of going to level that out? Again, my question is, do we have the same issues and same concerns?
I think so in a lot of ways. Many people that do live in Johnson County may have grown up in western Kansas or on a farm or something like that. So it's not like urban and rural is divorced from each other in this state. You know, I have worked for 2 different members of Congress over a span of 13 years, and we've seen the federal deficit increase by large numbers over those years. I think when just a decade ago, if you will, during the last redistricting, I think the publicly held federal debt was around $13 trillion. And just this past week, we topped $30 trillion. So I'm not sure it really matters where you draw the district boundaries until the federal government gets serious about federal spending and its jurisdiction. And so this coming week, my Federal and State Affairs Committee will be holding a hearing on a resolution which would apply for an Article 5 convention of states. And so far, there's, I think, around 17 states that have approved that resolution. And this resolution, this application for a convention of states, you have to get 2/3 of the states to pass this resolution. And right now, I think we're at 17 states. Nebraska just passed it within the last 2 weeks. So it's going to be a hearing that we have about invoking term limits on members of Congress, restraints on the jurisdiction and power of the federal government, and also to talk about federal spending. So.
You'll have to report back to us.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
It's very interesting. It's a grassroots movement taking place all across the country. And I found that it is a bipartisan effort. People are just feeling like Washington is out of touch. And so I don't know if it matters to some degree where you draw those boundaries here in the state of Kansas, because a lot of things don't change up in Washington.
We have another caller on the line with us, and again, a reminder, if you would like to ask a question of any of the legislators or make a comment, we encourage you to do so. The toll-free number to call, 1-800-337-4788. We have on the line with us from Hayes, Charles. And Charles, your question of the legislators this evening.
Well, I'd just like to say that, I don't know, we've been talking about this for years and nobody wants to mention it, but legalization of medical marijuana, you guys talk about taxes, that's a way to make some money and save a lot of people from driving to Colorado and spending their money there. And you know what's happening, it's been happening for years. Let's just face the situation when, through polls, you've already seen that 60 to 65% of the population wants this passed. And then I would say expansion of Medicare too. So anyway, and I wish people, politicians in general, would quit protecting their parties and start working together like Bob Dole did. All right, that's mine.
All right, well, thank you, Charles. Boy, the legalization of medical marijuana, hot topic. Steve, what do you think? What are you hearing?
Well, in the Kansas House of Representatives, there was a bill that did pass the Kansas House, and so it's now under consideration of the Senate whether or not they want to take that up or not. I personally voted against it, but I did offer an amendment, which if we're planning to treat this as a medical issue, it should be prescribed or recommended by a licensed physician and a licensed pharmacy by a licensed pharmacist. So that was the view I took. I offered an amendment to the bill. It didn't pass, but I do feel like we need to have some safeguards in there to ensure the safety of our patients and people with the proper medical training to understand how it affects other medications, other illnesses, other things a patient might be dealing with.
Other legislators, what have you heard, Barb?
Well, I feel the same, but the problem that if someone needs it for medical reasons, of course, a doctor prescribes it, pharmacy, but the problem is that marijuana is not legalized in the United States, so a pharmacy and a physician can't legally handle that, and so this is kind of a catch-22, so you have to get something else done in order to do that. And I just think going through dispensaries is going to be pretty scary. And if you look at Humboldt County in California and you see the problems that they've had with legalization of just flat legalization of marijuana.
I'm not familiar with that. What's happened there?
They legalized pot many years ago, and their illegal trafficking has increased enormously because it used to be little pot growers and doing having their own little business, and now because there are so many dispensaries, now the illegal larger drug dealers are trying to get in there and do it illegally, and it just causes a lot of cost and problems for police and for local jurisdictions. But I don't know how.
I voted for the bill last year when we had the debate, and the reason why is because, as Charles mentioned, I personally knew somebody who was diagnosed with cancer and went to Colorado for medicinal marijuana. And I think I agree with Charles. Why are we having our residents resorting to going to another state that has it legalized when we could do that in Kansas? So the medicinal marijuana, I have no problem as long as the structure of the bill is sound and it has clarity. I have no problem, and I voted for it in the House last year. Recreational marijuana, I do have an issue with. And if we look at Colorado, yeah, we can say they tax marijuana and that revenue stream is coming in, but nobody ever talks about the expenses that they have and the problems that has been caused in Colorado when they legalized recreational marijuana. I had a meeting many years ago with the Senate Majority Leader of Colorado, and he said, by all means, do not legalize recreational marijuana because the problems and the havoc that it caused outweighs the amount of revenue that you bring in.
Senator, your thoughts?
I agree with all the representatives here. I'm okay with medical if it's done through a pharmacist and a doctor's prescription. I am not no way in support of legalizing recreational marijuana. And I live right on the Colorado border, and we go to Denver quite often. And there's people sleeping on the streets, the problems they have in their schools. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And you can tell exactly when you get to the state line how bad the roads are in Colorado. And that was supposed to be for their schools and their roads, and it just hasn't panned out. And the TV that I get is out of Colorado, so I watch the news, every night. And it's they'll interview people that have moved there from Cleveland, and you moved here, so where are you working? No, I'm not working. I just moved here because it was legal to get marijuana. I mean, and they're sleeping on the streets, and it's pathetic what's going on in Colorado, and I think that's part of the issue in Kansas is we've seen other states where they've got these issues with recreational marijuana. So I think it's going to be a long time.
One good thing about Colorado passing recreational marijuana is you're seeing a lot of Coloradians moving to Kansas.
Yes.
Because they're
Yes.
seeing what the devastating, what's been going on. And not just, and mainly it is the Denver area. I mean, I've had numerous people in Colorado move into the 109th Kansas House District. I was in a parade in Smith Center, and I was talking to a couple that just bought a commercial property in Smith Center, and were moving their business and everything to Kansas because of the issues that's been going on
Interesting.
in the Denver area.
Well, that's one way to increase the population
That
of the first district, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's how we want to do it. That's just a thought.
Well, let's go back to our phone line. We have Bill from Garden City who would like to ask a question of the legislators this evening. Bill, what is your question?
You got a good-looking group of legislators here tonight. I'd like to ask, since we have two appropriators on the committee there tonight, what they think they're going to do with the state surplus. I'll hang up.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Sounds an awful lot like a bill that we know from Garden City in the House.
Oh, is it?
yeah.
If I would guess, I would think so. But,
So your answer for Bill then?
our game plan in the House, like I kind of mentioned it before, evaluate our debt, pay off debt, put money away, and then as Rick mentioned, they're doing the same thing on the Ways and Means side, is let's look and identify those one-time items that we could spend this surplus on, because it's not going to last forever.
Right.
You know, I've said this many times, but when we walked into session this year with a $3.8 billion surplus in the state government, I said, I think it's easier when we have no money.
It is.
When you're in the legislature than it is to have that much money, because everybody is now asking for a piece of it. And I would say 90% of what they're asking for is not one time. It's actually going to be a long-standing item that's going to be in the budget. One of the other things that I've been having my budget committee chairs go through in the appropriations committee is, okay, so if you can identify those one-time spends, then evaluate it and see if it needs to go through the state general fund, the state budget, or is that something that can be submitted to Spark? And we can utilize the federal dollars for that as well. And they've been looking at that when they've been reporting their budgets out to the appropriations committee. There's one item in the governor's budget that actually would impact Hayes with the building of a new armory.
Yep.
Other states have been doing that with their ARPA funds. So that could go through the Spark process and not through the state general fund. But we're trying to identify those one-time spends and then deciding, should this go to an application to Spark or should we just handle it out of the state budget?
I agree. Troy hit the, we've been working on this jointly through the summer and the one-time spends. And I'll just give you an example. The layering on capers is over $25 million that it saves us going forward in the budget. The payoff of a couple of bonds will save us another 25, almost 26 million. So we will save SGF about over $50 million going forward with those two little moves. You know, for years, I guess this is the first year the governor has not wanted to re-amortize capers. We've been working very hard trying to get capers funded, and we have got capers. I guess I'll just go back a little. In 2011, when I got to Topeka, Governor Brownback says, we've got to do something, folks. You know, these folks have put their money in, and we need to make sure that when they retire, they get every penny that they were promised. Well, at that time, it was in the low 50s. That's where we were. So it's similar to like the Teamsters Union, you think you're getting 1,000, and today they've only got $530 because that's all the funding there was. So we've worked on that for 10 years, put over $5 billion into that program, and we are funded at, I don't know, around 76 to 78%, depending on which numbers you look at. One of the things we're looking at in the Senate is putting additional funds into capers. We had a bill that our committee introduced last week to pay off the layering and also put additional funds in. And if we put another, I think it was 540 to 560 million into capers, we'll be over 80% funded. In 10 years, we went from low 50s to over 80%.
And that's
So-
considered fully funded by
Well,
actuaries.
Yeah,
Which
but-
they say, not,
right,
we know it's
right.
not.
Well,
but-
at 80%, that's the lowest you ever want to get.
Yeah.
Is 80%. And now we're just getting to where the
To it.
lowest we would ever want to be. And so, yeah, the one-time spends is one of the things that we're looking at. The rainy day fund, as Representative Waymaster mentioned, you know, we need to put some funds in there. We're turning every stone over, and much like the House, you know, we're trying to use different dollars and different things. I mentioned the deferred maintenance and some things that we can do at the universities, and every time we can do something like this, it lowers what we are required to put into SGF years going forward. And you know, it's one of them deals that when we have a downturn, we'll be prepared for it, and we won't have to be trying to cut this and cut that.
Steve, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to mention the House Insurance and Pensions Committee this week will be taking up HB 2561, which is the legislation that proposes to put $1 billion back into KPERS, and that we believe will bring KPERS up to 80% funded, and that'll save taxpayers $82 million in fiscal year 2023 and $429 million over the next 5 years. So it could be significant savings for the taxpayers, but also to let the people, the beneficiaries of KPERS, know that their pension plan is solvent and that the legislature is making vast improvements so they can count on retirement when the time has come.
We want to remind you that if you have a question to the legislators this evening, please give us a call, toll free, 1-800-337-4788. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we discuss this evening, especially for our far western Kansas legislators, is the what was termed the Four Counties fire that occurred in mid-December, which affected Ellis, Rooks, Russell, and Osborne counties. And there's been some discussion about a tax exemption for people to purchase fencing because it burned up, it's just gone. But there is a concern about including within this, apparently, expanding eligibility for property tax abatements, and again, taking away some of that money that is an income. So Barb, do you have any update on what might happen there?
Well, I'm one of the sponsors of the fence bill. I have friends that lost everything, and I'm sure everyone here knows of someone that did. And then last year, and years prior, we were trying to allow for people who have total devastation, such as this, fires, floods, things like that, to get tax relief. We probably have to work it out with counties and see what they are able to do. But if you have a farm that's gone and all of your cattle is gone, where are you going to get the money to pay any taxes? It's a really difficult decision to make. But right now, everything's being discussed in tax committee. Everything's being amended. It changes weekly, and we have people talking to us all the time about what they think is the best direction to go.
Well, and I would say I had 2 counties that were affected by the four-county fire. I was the initial sponsor of the bill, and Barb signed on with it, as did a few other legislators. And if you heard the testimony in the tax committee that day from a rancher who lost everything.
That's terrible.
I mean, it's just devastating what they're going through. And our intent was to keep this bill clean and move it through the process as fast as we possibly could. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And now it's being stalled because of amendments that were made onto it. We were hoping to, like I said, we were hoping to address this in the first couple weeks of session. And now we do have the Senate bill, but it has some amendments on it that I think makes the House nervous about proceeding with what the Senate passed. We have our House bill that passed out of the House Tax Committee that's sitting below the line, but as time keeps progressing during the legislative session, there are those that are concerned that we can't keep that one clean because more amendments would come onto it, especially when we're talking about sales tax on food. Someone will probably bring that because it probably would be germane to the bill. Like I said, we had hoped it would just stay clean and get passed and be done with. The other provision in the bill was to have something in place where it did not expire. And so we would not have to come back to the legislature when a devastating wildfire or other catastrophic event occurred where it wiped out a fence and keep having to go through the bill process. This would actually stay on state statutes.
So, Senator, what is the situation then in the Senate?
Well, the Senate added a couple of amendments. One of the amendments was that going forward after July 1st of 2022, this July, no one would have to pay sales tax on any fencing material. And this came up because Missouri and Oklahoma do not charge sales tax on their fencing, their posts and supplies to put up fence. So that amendment was added and was put on. The other amendment had to do with property tax. And it allows each county, if they choose, their county commissioners can say, we're not going to charge Becky property tax on that property until she gets it rebuilt. It's gone. They can say, okay, we're going to not charge you the sales tax on that property. So them are the two pieces that were added. I mean, hopefully I was like, Representative Wassinger and Waymaster, hoping that, the bill would stay clean, but, it's hard to vote against something. You never know. That's exactly right. And next week, I've got a bill that's being introduced to do additional help on taxes for these folks that was involved in the fire and floods.
People are anxious about it.
Yes.
Everybody. I mean, we talk about the 4 counties, but obviously it affects the entire state and even beyond. We have another phone call this evening from Annette. She's in Furley. And Annette, your question of the legislators this evening? Oh, we lost Annette. Okay. Well, I want to go back because I have a question, and I should have done my research, but Rick, you were just talking about the states that don't charge the sales tax on the fencing. I thought that was already true in Kansas, that farmers and ranchers were not paying it, and that's not accurate.
They have to pay tax on fencing, because fencing goes with the land, is what I was told. And so the other problem that I had heard originally, that they weren't able to insure fencing, but I've discovered from the insurance department that yes, you can insure farm fencing. It's just really expensive. So that was the other thing that came up in the tax committee, is a representative said, all of my farm is tax-free, pretty much. But I still have to pay it on fencing. So
I don't know where I got that notion.
It's because of the agricultural implementation of non-taxing agricultural goods. But fencing, and then sometimes they changed the bill so it sounded like if Troy had a fence in his backyard and that burned down, he could replace it without any sales tax. So we were really trying to zero in on people that were devastated by this natural disaster.
I think the amendment said agricultural fencing.
Okay.
So it didn't really say, I mean, you might have different
Something
type animals and you might need a wood fence, So it didn't limit it, it just said agricultural use.
Okay. Apparently we've been able to get Annette from Furley back on the phone line. Annette, your question this evening of the legislators?
Yes, I was wanting to address Stephen Howe about the Convention of States.
Did you have a specific question about that?
I did. Well, the way I understand it is if you call a Convention of States, they can actually rewrite the entire Constitution when they're in there. And I don't want to see a rewrite of the Constitution.
Right. Thank you, Annette, and thank you, Becky, for the question. Basically, this application for a convention of states only touches on three things. Term limits for members of Congress, the size and scope of the federal government, and federal spending. So it's limited to those three items. And so those 17 states that have already passed this application for a convention of states, all of those applications, those resolutions are identical. So we have to get up to 2/3, which is 34 states. And so once you get 2/3, then the Congress has to call a convention of states. And after that, any proposed amendment would have to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. So it's not like it's a quick and easy process. And so I think it is something that is gaining traction, and I'm hopeful through our hearing this week that we get some positive feedback.
Do you have a feel for what kind of timeline it would be to get up to 34 states in agreement?
I don't know, Becky. That'd be pure speculation on my part.
Possible?
I don't know. I wish I could say, but it has gained the approval of several states in the last few weeks. Nebraska, and I think it was Nevada, if I'm not mistaken. So we're heading in the right direction.
Well, we'll wait for that report from you. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening here at Smoky Hills Public Television with the season kickoff of the Kansas Legislature show. And a big thank you, of course, to our Western Kansas legislators who work so very hard and still take time out to come do shows like this and are here to present information to you, questions that you have. So again, I want to give a big thank to Representative Barb Wassinger from Hayes, also Representative Troy Waymaster from here in Bunker Hill. Joining us from Goodland, Senator Rick Billinger, and our newish legislator from Salina, of course, Steve Howe. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. We'll see you back here and again in a week. I'm Becky Kiser.
In our increasingly electrified society, that's where a resilient grid matters most. ITC Great Plains is ensuring the greater grid can meet our energy needs now and long into the future. Learn more at itc-holdings.com.